Well, sitting here on the old front porch. That's my view behind me at the front porch. You normally face that way. Thought it'd be kind of nice little backdrop setting while I do a video for the first time like this. Want to talk a little bit about Cliff High, the webbot, and some comments he had made recently about the meteor that broke apart in Russia and all that stuff, caused a bunch of damage and knocked people back through the glass on them and all that stuff. That in regards to Courtney Brown and his remote viewing team, as well as what he thought was a potential hit of something they saw during the remote viewing session, which was the impact of meteors. Um, Long story short is they had a little bit of a disagreement between the two of them, and they kind of agreed to disagree. Um, Cliff High is thinking that because of some recent data he's pulled from the webbot, um, an earthquake is going to be coming end of the month, this month, basically in another several days, plus or minus a few days. I think the date he gave was February 28th, plus or minus several days on each end of that day. I got to tell you though, the last couple, maybe 2 to 3 years, I'm guessing, I'd say around 2 years, the webbot as far as hitting like earthquakes was not too accurate. I mean, it did nail the one in, what was it, '04 or whatever, or '05, the big one that killed 200,000 people in Indonesia. It nailed that one in advance. That's why I pay attention to it, because it's right sometimes, and more so than not a lot of times. But for whatever reason, the earthquake stuff hadn't been on the money in the last bunch of reports, going back a couple years. And it seemed like he kind of left that data out. Excuse me. So, anyways, he's saying there's data now, uh, saying that there's going to be a sizable earthquake. I'm not going to hold my breath, obviously, but the interesting thing was with what he said and about that, and then Courtney Brown. Courtney Brown said in his data, if you go, long story short, is they did a remote viewing session, Courtney Brown's team, in just prior to June of 2008, for June of 2008, as well as June of 2013. And when you look at the difference of what they saw in June of 2008 was just a normal day, whatever, and they had multiple targets in America on the coastlines mostly, a couple of places in Florida. I know one was, I think, Cape Canaveral. Washington, D.C. was another one, and some other spots. Didn't really look out of the normal, everything looked fine. And then they did the same date, basically June of 2013, and it was a whole different picture. And something was slamming down from the sky. It looked like it was crashing down into the water, they think, knocking people back. And then after that, people panicking, running for their lives, blood, sweat, stinky human smells was a lot of what was coming up. Primitive, the word primitive kept coming up. And again, I'm talking about the remote viewing stuff that Courtney Brown team saw. Primitive this, primitive that, primitive this, primitive that, kept coming up over and over again. Smell of sweaty humans, unbathed humans, people cooking in a pot, basically outside in a campfire, and adding the small game, whether that be squirrels, rabbits, whatever. They're adding like pieces of like weeds or roots of things and dumping it in there to kind of give it a little extra bonus or whatever. Um, but Courtney Brown seems to feel that maybe something else is coming soon, but that the meteor section of what they remote viewed may have just happened with the thing with Russia, because it did slam people back. It knocked them through windows. The glass slammed into people, and that's part of what the language came out of the remote viewing sessions. However, I'm going to sit here and say, when I look at the rest of the remote viewing session, there's no way in hell that was the event. So I guess in all fairness, what Courtney Brown's saying is I'm open to there being some more stuff coming soon that may fulfill the rest of what we saw. But I think the meteor stuff had happened. So out of three things or so, number one, meteor check mark, is what he's saying. Cliff High is saying, I don't think that was it. I think we got more to come, because the other day in his other forecast, or his broadcast, the Wuzhou stuff on the 22nd, I believe, of this month, he did one, and then another one on the 25th, which is the one I'm talking about. Or excuse me, he did one, I think, on the 15th, and then one on the 22nd or something like that. And the latest one's the one where he's talking about some of this stuff. But he said in the one from, I think, the 15th or whatever it was, that there's more meteors coming. There's going to be even more damage than what had occurred recently in Russia, that kind of thing. But I kind of feel like what he's saying is this little thing in Russia was nothing. It shouldn't have even been considered anything on the web watch. Shouldn't have been considered anything on the remote viewing. That I think the big one's coming. Because when I look at the images and the pictures that they drew on the remote viewing session, which you can go to farsight.org and go download the PDFs, the files, and you'll see, what they had to say, as well as the pictures that they drew. And it looks like a big object slamming into the ocean or water or something, and causing major devastation. Because number one, the lights are still on. People are not eating out of pots and small game. Stinky humans, unbathed, and no sounds of machinery anywhere was another thing it said. No sound of any kind of modern equipment, or in other words, the power's out kind of thing. It was all like hand saws or just people working by hand together is what that stuff said. So anyways, I guess the big point of this video is that Cliff Eye is thinking, and he said it should be around the Pacific Northwest, he thinks. But the data showing an earthquake of sizable proportions coming. So, I mean, maybe the guy from Farsight, Courtney Brown's right in that the earth or the meteor stuff happened, and then now let's say an earthquake happens, a matter of days or a week or two, whatever later. End of the month, let's assume a huge one happens and causes what Cliff Eye was talking about in all his old data stuff, as well as new stuff he's been doing. It's still there, the global coastal event. Maybe that's triggered by this massive earthquake, and then that causes the primitive things to occur on the coastlines, because that's the area that they remote viewed, was the coastlines mostly. So, I don't know. So I'm just kind of feeding you this, man, to just, tell you about some potential stuff that could or could not be coming. You got to take the web out with a grain of salt. It's not always right. It's right enough that I pay attention to it. I've got proof of things that it forecasts. Again, the earthquake that killed 200,000 people in Indonesia, that's one of many things. Back in 2003, I think, with the space shuttle re-entering and breaking apart over Texas and all that, it had like the latitude and longitude or one or the other perfectly nailed. But they kept saying the word ship, this and that, ship. So he was assuming, a boat, not a spaceship or space shuttle, etc. But it happened on the day. It was exact description of what happened, breaking apart over this latitude, whatever. I mean, it was unbelievable. So, that's why I pay attention to it. It may not be right all the time, but it's right enough for me to say, hey, I'd like to know of a potential thing that's coming my way, even though I know it may not happen. At least I have some foresight or, into the matter or whatever. So that's all I really want to talk about. So I want to share that with you. Go ahead and get this thing uploaded, and I will talk to you all later. And I'll give you a little update on the restaurant. It's probably going to be another week from now before we really get that place cleaned up to where I can take some video. I don't want you seeing machinery and chairs and dust and sawdust all over the place, while they're working inside redoing stuff. Because it's like they get into something and then they have to fix a wall and then they take the toilet off and it's wrong. They're going to fix the plumbing and, that kind of thing. So anyways, I'll let you go and I'll keep you up to date. Take care.